Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the one podcast that would make you take your eyes off the current Hungarian Grand Prix that is going on today on this beautiful Sunday morning. Welcome to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, your favorite NFL podcast going right now. We're so happy to be here with every single one of you. And per usual, we are here for fun football chaos. And as always, I am joined by my brothers in arms on the top of the screen with me, our games master himself, looking off into the distance. No despair yet, Justin. We haven't gone to the Jets review portion of the previews yet. We're still a couple weeks away from that. But we got Justin. We got our games master Justin here with us. Justin, how we doing?
Good. A little tired, but happy to be here.
Hey, I feel you. The weekends they can be a little bit tiring. The weekends can be a bit tiring, especially with your weekend schedule you got planned for the summers. It's just
crazy. Too much.
And then, of course, at the bottom of the screen, the man, the myth, the legend himself, the defending champion, the Podfather. There's a million different labels that we could put on this man, but it's Rick. Rick, how we doing?
So, teasing a little mind-blowing fact here, I shot better at my last round of golf than somebody who was in the British Open this weekend.
Really?
Because one of the Japanese players, he was so bad on the back nine that he ended up shooting a 91, and I shot an 87 my last round. So, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, here I come for the claret jug.
There we go. So as Rick is beginning to prepare his scratch golf career and taking that forward, we are here to continue our 2024 NFL divisional breakdowns. We are continuing our trek through the NFC. Yes, we've changed up the format this year, ladies and gentlemen. We are going conference to conference. We started with a banger, a massive episode last week covering two divisions in the NFC South and the NFC East, and we are continuing that today with the NFC North, and we're going to wrap it up on the next episode before we then move on to the AFC, home to the defending Super Bowl champions. I feel like I've been saying that for a good bit on this podcast. Actually, no, to be fair, first year we did this, the Rams were the defending champs, but still. So we will have a good, fun time, to say the very least, once we get to that point. But before we get on to the breakdown part of this, of course, the NFC North, and plenty of good conversation, I think, to talk about with those teams, we have the fun part to hit first. And the Podfather is beginning it with the return this week of a mind-blowing fact.
You guys remember earlier this week, or maybe even not earlier this week, a couple of days ago, that we had that global tech outage all across the world, and really how that kind of disabled air travel and a lot of other different things. I mean, luckily I was off when it happened. I won't say that I was what caused it because I don't work for CrowdStrike, but I mean, I was in the mountains of Northwest New Jersey, so, here or there. But it did get me to think about this one story that I remember from the eons of the internet, from back in the mid 2000s, that was really interesting to me. So before the days of the NFL owning all the teams' websites, whereas NFL.com/Giants or /Cowboys or whatever, every team basically had their own website in a way. So, it was basically DallasCowboys.com. The Cowboys are the main part of the story here. So the Cowboys back in 2007 decided, let's grab up all the domains that we can, just so that when people try and search our team, no matter what they hit that's related to us, they'll get to the Dallas Cowboys. So 2007, the URL handle cowboys.com was up for auction. And in 2007, this was an auction that was held by a Tampa-based company that was called Traffic Domain, actually in Hollywood, Florida. I think Hulk Hogan's hometown, if you will. And so the auction was going on, and somebody from the Cowboys called in and bid on the site, and they put in a bid of $275. Little did they know, or there was a bit of a consternation, that they thought they were buying the URL for $275 when it was actually in $1,000 increments. So it was $275,000 for that domain. So eventually they decided, to walk away from the deal. And it was the domain cowboys.com was sold for about $390,000 back in 2007. The domain kind of rested, let the dust for about 5 years. It was bought by a company named City Advertising, whose president and CEO, Darren Cleveland, basically was proud to have this, but kind of, it was a domain. So what are you going to do for 5 years? Well, in 2012, Cowboys.com came to life as a dating website for gay and straight people looking for dating cowboys. So the website cowboys.com, rather than going to your NFL updates for about the team with the star on their uniform, for a time ended up being a site where if you wanted to lasso yourself a date for the hootenanny, you could do that, because cowboys.com ended up being kind of like the precursor to farmersonly.com, if you will, where it was a cowboy dating app, basically. And then about 2 years later, the app went away and the website and the URL kind of went back up for auction. And I think the Cowboys bought it for about 10 cents on the dollar, and they just, quieted away. But it's interesting because, I'm sure in the earlier days of the internet, you've had this kind of like issue where you've had these, you had your .coms and your .nets and your .orgs and all of that. But, if you don't buy the URL, you never know whose hand's going to fall into. And in this case, it was a pretty funny blunder for Jerry Jones to try and go onto Cowboys.com and look up his team's stats, and instead, are you single and looking for a cowboy to pair up with? So,
I mean, how do we know he didn't still use the site?
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's some quality control where Steven and Jerry Jr. and Jethro and all the kids, were like, nah, like stop this, Grandpa. So
stop this, Grandpa. Oh, but fantastic fact right there. And honestly, Rick, like just the beginning of it, you bringing it back to a time where every single team site did used to be through the sports leagues, and now it is, and now basically it's its own thing every single time.
Yeah.
So,
I mean that was kind of cool because there were teams that, before they were owned by, like, even in minor leagues, before they were owned by, their affiliates, they would have their own sites, and those sites would be like a graphic designer's heaven because of how just many random things were on it, and they were allowed to have their own freedom and creativity. And now everything is so uniform and structured that it's like just, boring in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're not wrong indeed. We need creativity back in this world when it comes to sites, logos, and all that, because this could be a whole other show. This could be the next Lazy River episode that we decide to do for ourselves one day. But like NCAA logos for March Madness, the Super Bowl logos, good Lord, they're boring nowadays.
Oh yeah, they are.
They're just boring as all hell. So
yeah,
we have that. But what's not boring? Rick's mind-blowing fact. But what's also not boring? The games from the Game Master himself. We have one this week, but just because it's one doesn't mean it's not going to be a good one. See what I did there? Yeah. All right. Let's let's move on. Justin, take the reins here, and let's play another game of Name That Player. Just pretend there's an audience in the background that echoed that, ladies and gentlemen.
How would they know which game we were playing this time? Would you announce it beforehand so that they could participate in the?
Well, you didn't see before we went on the air. The warm comedian went to the audience and tried to get them ready for the show. So that's what happened.
That's what I missed.
If we ever do this show live, Justin, what will happen is there will be monitors and a monitor or two in front of us, and it'll say the name of the game before I say it, and then that way the crowd will know.
Okay, I get it.
Yes.
Okay, so speaking of Name That Player, we are going to go to Auburn, Alabama, where this player was born and raised. He was a top performer in his high school in track and field in the state. He did long jump, and he ran 55 meters in 6.74 seconds, which is pretty unbelievable. Before he went on to join the Troy Trojans in college.
The Troy Trojans out of Auburn, Alabama. So when you said Auburn, Alabama, my initial thought was Cadillac Williams, but now you said Troy, it's definitely not Cadillac Williams because he went to Auburn and coached Auburn, as a matter of fact.
I'm just trying to think of any Troy players, but I don't know if I can. Dang.
I think I know one, but if this is the poll, this is going to be pretty amazing for me. But I don't think this is it. But I'm going to say if this is the poll, I like this. Leotis McKelvin.
It is not Leotis McKelvin, but that would have been something.
But how about that name for a poll too? That would have been Okay.
I think the only player I remember that went to Troy, and I only remember this because when he was on Pat McAfee's show, because he's definitely been on Pat's show, like, Pat always does the intro and he points out facts about guys. And I remember when he said that this guy went to Troy, I'm like, really? I just never knew where he went. Only Troy player I could think of is DeMarcus Ware. So I will say it's DeMarcus Ware, but I don't know if he grew up in Auburn, Alabama, but DeMarcus Ware is my only guess here. So
DeMarcus Ware.
he went to Troy, apparently. I don't think he grew up in Alabama.
I didn't even get to any of the good facts, Jerg.
No, what? That's it.
Wow.
DeMarcus Ware actually went to high school and Troy with other famous defensive end OCU Manura.
Oh, no way.
He was a 9-time Pro Bowler, Hall of Famer, and drafted by the Cowboys in the 2005 NFL draft in the first round. I believe he was the 11th pick. And I could have pivoted to OCU Manura, but I was just so shocked that you got the guy with no hints that Troy gave it away. I guess that's
the power of the Pat McAfee show there for you. I thought I did pretty well with an off the beaten path guy of Leotis McKelvin. I forgot that he was
I thought that would have been
first
it,
round
honestly.
pick. Yeah,
you guys got 2 guys out of Troy. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and then the OC's the third.
OC is the third.
There we go. Can we name a third? Can we name a fourth?
With Marcus Ware. Imagine that offensive line in high school and defensive line in high school.
Oh my god,
Marcus Ware and OCU Manura.
I mean, that's pretty formidable. But then again, this is Alabama high school football we're talking about, and they're probably like the 6th best D line in Alabama because there's some kid who went to like Alabama that played D line who ended up flaming out after 2 years and is now a car salesman down in Jackson, Mississippi or wherever. Who was like at one point I was the best high school prospect in Alabama.
Can you imagine the one high school quarterback that had a good game? And then, like, now 20, 25 years later to his kids and eventually his grandkids, he's going to be able to tell them, it's like, I faced DeMarcus Ware and OCU Manura in high school. And his grandkids are going to be like, who?
I'm sorry. Who's that? What?
The grandkids are going to be like, what are you talking about, Grandpa?
Yeah,
I'm talking silly again.
Oh, Grandpa.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. It's spectacular to say the very least.
Yes.
No, look at that. So I did not expect that. Yeah, DeMarcus Ware was the definition of a shot in the dark because I was not confident in that.
Yeah. I really should have pivoted to OCU Manura. He's got a lot of interesting facts here.
What were the other
players who won a Super Bowl?
1 of 5 British-born players?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's a future trivia. Name the other 4.
I don't think you will.
No, probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Wow. Okay. Yeah. What are the other facts you got aside of that one? It's a pretty good one.
About DeMarcus Ware?
Yeah. Whoever. Yeah. You were so set. Let's hear the rest of them.
I mean, I pretty much gave it all. I drafted in the first round under the 11th pick. He's got 654 career tackles, 138.5 career sacks, 35 forced fumbles. Pretty good career.
I think if we hadn't gotten it in the first one, I think we would have had a chance because the sacks combined with the draft pick, like we would have started to like.
That would have been the last clue. I would have gone more into. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler.
Oh,
Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we probably would have gotten on the third one because I think in the third one, once you mentioned the sacks, we would just start to think, like, okay, all-time sack list, and then you'd be able to knock out, like, obviously with that amount, it's like, all right, it's not Reggie White, it's not Bruce Smith, Aaron Donald just retired, and we know he didn't go to Troy.
That is true. He did not go to Troy.
We would have slowly been able to start to knock guys out, and then it's like, all right, we would have started to think like, okay, is it Von Miller? No, he didn't go to Troy. Not J.J. Watt. He definitely didn't grow up in Alabama. I think by process of elimination, I think we would have gotten DeMarcus Ware eventually, but look at that, DeMarcus Ware. So
how about that?
We saved 6 to 7 minutes of us bumbling around like idiots, Rick.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
We saved that for the people. But no, that was a spectacular Name That Player. Name That Player has been a phenomenal add to the games.
It has been.
So that's a good one right there, Justin. Yeah. And we haven't. I don't think we're perfect in it, by the way, either. I think we have missed on 1 or 2, at least 1.
I think so. I mean, I can't think off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure we missed a couple here or there. Yeah.
So this is the challenging aspect of it, which we love. A good challenge. Speaking of a good challenge, That's what teams are going to be vying for this season in the NFC North, because last season, the winner in the NFC North was the Detroit Lions, the first division title for the franchise since 1993, meaning this was the first division title for them since the realignment and them being in the NFC North. And last season, their first appearance in the conference championship game since 1991. So what a banner year it was for Detroit. But there are 3 teams in that division that are going to come for them, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue the fun. I mean, always continues, but the fun aspect is fully over. The games are done. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Justin. Now we go on to the football aspect of the program, and this is where we really shine. Ladies and gentlemen, our 2024 NFL divisional breakdowns here on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast continues with the NFC North. For those of you that are new to this, if this is the first time you're seeing our division breakdowns, even though the conference format we're going after is different, the in-division format stays the same, where we're going to review each team one by one from how they finished last season inverse. So we start from the team that finished 4th place in the division last year, going up to the top. So we give the context that the Lions are the defending division winners here, and there are 3 teams vying for them. Let's start with the first of those 3, and 2 teams actually tied for 7-10 last season in this division. But one of them technically had to be last place, and the team that lost the tiebreaker was the Chicago Bears. Rick's former beloved, the Chicago Bears. RIP to that 1-year fandom that we got to enjoy and make fun of here on the podcast.
We had a lot of fun, and the Wheel of Chaos decided, nah. We're done with this. Although I will say this, I am willing to keep up with the bit if the Jets underperform this year. So I'm willing to keep it going because it's fun.
I think it would be funnier if the Jets won the Super Bowl this year, but you still changed.
I mean, yeah, you know what? I mean, I can't stay proud for that long because I want Justin to enjoy his Super Bowl win, free of any questionable fan activities. Like
that might be the greatest season of Justin's life. His team finally wins the Super Bowl, and he gets to kick you out of the fan base again.
Do a Survivor, stuff my torch. So I have to leave.
Why would I kick him out if they win?
I think it would just be funny. Be like, okay,
I'm a Jets fan. You got to be a little superstitious at this point.
I mean, that is true. That is very true.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong indeed, Justin. So let us continue the fun and games here, but let's start to do some football analysis. And let's begin this, ladies and gentlemen, with the Chicago Bears. And the Chicago Bears finished 7-10 last season when soul searching and fell in love. We're just now seeing that under part right there taking off.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's fish puns, dad fish puns. So
love it. We love it.
Yeah.
But ladies and gentlemen, we start with Chicago Bears, and we're starting with a team that they went through a lot of changes in the offseason, despite the fact that they finished 7-10 because of a 300 IQ move they made the season prior. They got the first overall pick because the Carolina Panthers were just many, many kinds of god-awful last season. So with the first overall pick in a draft class that had a true generational quarterback, according to everyone, the Chicago Bears got lucky, and they got that top pick, and they thankfully didn't troll anyone or waste it. They picked Caleb Williams with the first overall pick in this past draft. They sent Justin Fields away to the AFC for him to try to revitalize his career in some way, shape, or form. We'll be talking about that team in a couple weeks' time once we get to the AFC side of the division previews. But for now, ironically, also the AFC North, I think, will be the second to last division we talk about in the AFC. So North, the connection is right there, ladies and gentlemen. We totally did this planned out like that. No, we didn't. But Caleb Williams is going to be the new signal caller for the Chicago Bears. He's going to be starting right away. Tyson Bagent and Brett Rippon are going to, just be holding clipboards, hold coffee, hold whatever they need to hold for the kid and for the coaching staff at that point, because it's going to be the Caleb Williams show unless they just randomly just bench him for a game, which I think that would just cost Eberflus his job, or he just randomly gets hurt and they think to themselves, let's be a little bit smart with our future of the franchise, hopeful future of the franchise right here. And Caleb Williams is going to get a bit of support on his side this upcoming season, boys, from a signing of DeAndre Swift in free agency to a trade of Keenan Allen, the draft pick of Rome Odunze, and the stability there of Cole Kmet at tight end and DJ Moore now entering year 2 in Chicago. There's a lot of weapons that Caleb Williams has the potential to throw to here, boys. An offensive line that they're hoping can take that next step. You have Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins on the left side of the line. You're hoping that Darnell Wright can really establish himself as the definitive guy on the right side of the line at right tackle spot this season if you're the Bears. And then a defense that it's a bit of a interesting thing. It is predominantly young players, some older guys in there, but you have young guys that you're hoping can, just take it a step further even with their progression, right? From a Tyreek Stevenson, a young corner who they got recently in drafts past, Jaquan Brisker, who was one of the guys that we have praised in drafts past as well. But like as I mentioned, there's the mix there with veterans. You have a Kevin Byard, former Tennessee Titan there in the secondary. You have a linebacking core that's actually predominantly veterans here in the TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, that you hope lead things. And Montez Sweat, the big acquisition from last year's trade deadline. And man, that's a second-round pick still worth it because that was a pretty good second-round pick. And they're hoping that a full year of Montez Sweat can be something special, to say the very least, in Chicago. And DeMarcus Walker, they're hoping that him, a former draft pick that they made, another young guy can, come in and, well, not come in, but, make that leap for them. And that's going to be a key thing for Chicago, is that young guys that they have can take a leap, and the veterans that they have there can provide stability. So a bit of a mix, to say the very least, on this Bears roster. Rick, I'm going to throw it to you first, your former beloved team here, of course, for a full calendar's year time, or whenever the 2 episodes took place. But the Chicago Bears, 7-10 last season, not bad. Finished last in the NFC North, technically speaking. But this isn't necessarily a team that, I don't think on paper, with some of the resets they made, I don't think this is a team on paper that you can expect to have too bad of a year. Like, I don't know if they'll be 500, but 500 doesn't exist anymore because of a 17-game season, but I don't think they'll be 8-9 wins, but I don't think Bears fans should despair either. At least I don't think so. What are your thoughts on this team?
No, I don't think that the Bears will be worse than they were last year. I don't believe that. I believe that they have a solid enough defense to make their case that they're going to have, be in a lot more games. And they added significant amounts of weapons. The trade for Keenan Allen gives them a number 1, and the drafting of Rome Odunze gives them a future number 1 because, Allen's 32 and DJ Moore, who's on the team, is 27. So, while they're on the younger side, they're still a little more veteran. They're a little older, so that gives them a little more room to play with. I think the thing is that this is kind of one of those weird years because you have all of this talent, and given any other circumstance, you would probably say this is a team that could surprise people and make a playoff run. But they have the number 1 overall pick, and it was a quarterback. And we know that the growing pains of the number 1 overall pick and the quarterback could be a problem, in significant games. The other issue for Chicago is that, one of the things that we talk about a lot is the fact that this is a squad that, has to play some of these odd games. They have an earliest, they have week 7 bye, but then they play 2 games on the road and then 3 straight at home, including 2 against divisional foes. And so the question becomes, how do you balance that with a team that has that mixture of youth and veteran experience? I like this team. I think this is a very good Chicago Bears team. Do I see them going past 7 wins? I don't really know, because the top 2 in this division are so good, and the Packers and the Lions. They have a difficult stretch where I believe they've got the AFC South this year. They have to play Houston. They got to play Jacksonville, who needs a little bit of a revenge. They got to play Indy, who's going to be a tougher team, and you've also got, games against the Rams, games against the Niners, the Seahawks. The schedule's not kind of them this turnaround. So, but this is really the year. This is make or break for Caleb Williams in year 1. This is like, prove it. Prove that you were the number 1 overall pick. Prove that we sent Justin Fields away for you to be a better player. And I think like I said, he's got a wealth of talent around him. But my question is, again, which Caleb Williams are we going to see? Are we going to see the Caleb Williams who threw for 42 touchdowns and 4,600 yards and won the Heisman in his sophomore year? Or the one in his junior year where he threw for 30 touchdowns, but his passing yards were down. His record wasn't really there because the team around him wasn't that good. What Caleb Williams are we going to see? The team that lifts him or the team that falls because of him? And that's going to be the real question mark for Chicago. And honestly, it's going to be tough for guys like, on the upper left, like Eberflus and Ryan Poles to justify this if they don't make a significant impact. But I don't know if they're going to, because I think they'll be as good as they were last year, if not a little bit better. But I think that they'll benefit from another team in this division being worse, to be honest with you. But I don't know. I think, like I said, they've got a lot of good talent around them. Their draft was solid with Williams and Odunze and Kieran Amigdaji, who I loved coming out of Yale. And you mentioned that their linebacking core and the defensive backfield. So it's a good, talented team. It's just, can that translate from paper to the gridiron? And I just don't know if it can.
Yeah, it's there's pieces there. There's a semblance of a team that in the future can do something. But I think the question is, and Justin, as I throw this over to you, of course, you give your thoughts on the roster, but we kind of I forget when we had this. Maybe it wasn't on air. Maybe it was like us just texting in the chat behind the scenes. But like the idea that what is progression for the Chicago Bears this season? Because how much better could they potentially be than 7-10 last year with a new quarterback? But then consider Ryan Poles and Eberflus and their consistency. Like, what, Justin, to you screams the concept of progression for this team for 2024?
That's such a tough answer because progression for certain parts of the team isn't necessarily progression for other parts of the team. Like if you tell me a team with a brand new rookie quarterback and a pretty much brand new offense is going to go 7-10 and have like a really good looking season, but just didn't put it all together yet, I would say that's fantastic. But for a coach in his fifth year with the GM that's been there for a while, 7 wins isn't great. And now all of a sudden you're going to have a bunch of older players on 1 and 2 year contracts that you say, what do I do with this? Is Keenan Allen going to be the long-term solution there? Is DeAndre Swift the long-term solution there? Like, these are guys at the tail ends of their careers that came to play with a young, solid quarterback. They've had the defensive pieces in place. I think last year you don't necessarily see it come up on the stat sheet, but I think that's because they were on the field a ton because the offense couldn't get anything going. That offensive line needs to take a step forward, but they have pieces there now. I think the answer to this question is if the Chicago Bears don't take a step forward, is the coaching staff in the right people for the job? And then if they're not, what are you doing in Chicago that you allowed this to happen with the number 1 overall pick and arguably the highest touted rookie quarterback since Joe Burrow or Andrew Luck? You know what I mean? This kid has been the guy for about 3 years now, and you're going to allow the GM did a good job of putting the correct pieces around him, I believe. But if it goes sideways, there's going to be a lot of question marks in Chicago.
Yeah, for sure. I think you bring up a good point there that, what is the definition of progression here for this team? And I think for me, we kind of said this about some of the other teams last week that we project to be lower in both the divisions, which if you want our full NFC East and South breakdown, ladies and gentlemen, check back on the YouTube for that. But, you kind of bring up a good point there, Justin, that Caleb Williams, I think 7 wins in a Caleb Williams season is actually not a bad shout. Like, even though that'd be the same amount as last season, there's the context of it's a different young quarterback and it's a couple of different pieces there that just weren't there a year ago. But like you said, I think the most important thing is, we talk about the pieces that are there, is the head coach there. And look, this was my piece last year about it going into the offseason, or I technically should say earlier this year. I don't think the right coach is there for the optimal success with Caleb Williams. I just don't. Like, look, can you have success with a defensive coach and a new young rookie quarterback? Yes. And if you somehow think that's not possible, check back to the Texans last year. But even I think last year with Houston, it's not necessarily going to be the trend going forward, right? Like, there's differences between blips and trends. And Houston is a massive blip. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the definitive trend going forward, especially if this is a coach who has shown that maybe his coordinator choices, they aren't the best because they had a coordinator getting in trouble off the field last season. We don't want to talk about players doing that, which the next team will talk about players having issues off the field, to say the very least.
Oh, boy.
But the Bears, it was the case that 2 coaches last season. So it's a very tricky situation in Chicago. Ryan Poles, I think, a lot of fire last season, right? A lot of questions about him. I think with the combination of the Montez Sweat trade, which we need to give credit where credit is due, I think he did a phenomenal job with that trade, knocked it out the park. I'm sure the second-round pick that was used is a fine player. I don't know if they're going to be better than what Montez Sweat could be over the next 5 seasons to start their career, right? And if you have Caleb Williams, a player like a Montez Sweat is exactly what you need for the start of his career if you hope he can do kind of buck the trend of some rookie QBs, at least in year 1 and 2, and just leap this team forward. But I think it's more than fair to say the coach is still a question there. And look, this was his first coaching hire, right? Eberflus was his first guy. You kind of have to wonder, like we always talk about GMs getting multiple bullets right? They get their first head coach, they get their second head coach. Some of them somehow get a third head coach, which we still try to figure out that math from time to time. Polls, you almost have to wonder if the Bears are getting decent performances out of Williams to start, but the team is floundering. Could that be the excuse they need to execute a midseason change? Not that the coach they hire would be the one going forward, obviously, but just get the old out, see what you have, and then maybe next season, 2025 is the year where if you nail that hire, you could get something going on, right? Like it's just one of those things you have to wonder about a squad at the end of the day. But I think what the both of you have said has been made good points. Like, look, can DJ Moore, let's be real here, DJ Moore last season, kind of surprised with the year he had because of the inconsistency of the quarterback play, right? He had a phenomenal year. Now he has Keenan Allen to lean on a consistency basis, right? If Keenan Allen is healthy, that's a guy that can also, take a defender or two away, or at least with his presence, right? He has shown that he could still have a game from time to time. And a young Rome Odunze being able to learn from those two. I think the potential of growth on the offensive side with the skill position talent is there. And if DeAndre Swift can put together more than just 2 good games, that'd be really good for Chicago, to say the very least. But I think, Rick, you kind of mentioned what Caleb Williams will we see. I also think that kind of depends on the offensive line that we're going to see. Are we going to see a Chicago Bears team that could be a stable, steady rock on the offensive line, which is what USC was 2 seasons ago when Caleb won the Heisman? Or are we going to see a Bears team that they maybe don't have the offensive line as figured out like they thought they were? And that's what last year's USC team was, right? And it forced Caleb Williams to have to step out the pocket way more than I think he and the staff even originally intended to. And, once a quarterback steps out the pocket, it's a good thing to have that skill set, but it also starts to become tricky in theory, right? When you talk about receivers having to constantly move around, linemen needing to block, then again, part of the reason it might happen is because the linemen couldn't block in the first place. So it's a complicated situation there, but I think the progression of the offensive line more than anything is going to be the make or break for what Chicago can do this season. If they can somehow coach up that offensive line to be even 15th or 16th, right? I'm not going to say top 10, but if they can even be league average, right? The Bears have a lot of more potential than what we might be thinking, and they might have the ability to surprise some of the upper teams in this division. I'm kind of with you guys. I don't see too much of a surprise leap, even though the three of us do kind of agree that the wild card spots are relatively open in the NFC, save for the first one, because we know the secondary, at least for some of us, the secondary team in the NFC East is going to get that one of the 3 wild card spots. We do, the Bears probably aren't going to challenge for that. But can they surprise Green Bay or Detroit? Can they throw a wrench in one of those 2 teams' plans this season? I think later in the year, scheduling-wise, that could be something very interesting to look at when it comes to the Chicago Bears. And if we just take a brief look at the schedule, I know Rick pointed it out earlier. You look at the games that they have later on in the season. 2 of their last 3 games are against the Lions and the Packers. Could they play spoiler to one of those 2 teams, boys, come week 16 or 18? Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially. I think it's a fair thing to be able to say there. But this is a relatively young team with some pieces there that have a bit of NFL experience. And that could go a long way for the internal growth for this team. But kind of like we said, what is progress for Chicago? I think we're just going to have to wait and see how the season plays out. Maybe progress is getting the guy there that you believe is actually going to be the long-term future coach, right? And we'll see what that future holds. But that will be something to break down in 2025. In 2024, however, we continue on with a team that finished 3rd in the division last year, barely winning the tiebreaker over the Chicago Bears, and that is the Minnesota Vikings. And oh dear, oh my, this is a very different Minnesota Vikings team from last season. Primetime Kirk Cousins is not the quarterback there anymore. Dalvin Cook wasn't there last season. He was there the year before. They tried to do something different with the running back room. Didn't work out with Alexander Matheson and what else they had. So they hit a bit. They changed it up there. So, they got rid of Dalvin Cook because, his better years were behind him. It wasn't going to go well. So they got Aaron Jones, who's about Dalvin Cook's age, if not maybe a year older. I'd have to double check off the top of my head, but they're pretty close in age, relatively speaking. It is Aaron Jones there joining that skill position group that, again, brings back TJ Hawkinson, brings back Jordan Addison if he's not going to speed cars all over the place, and brings back Justin Jefferson, who, pending if he's going to join the Antonio Cromartie and the Philip Rivers sweepstake of children one day. We'll see that pending 3, 4, 5 more years. Or the Tyreek Hill thing, because Tyreek Hill also apparently busy. I don't get these guys whatsoever. And these skill position players, they're going to be helping a young quarterback extraordinaire that this team is putting their faith in for 2024 and beyond, boys. Sam Darnold is the starting quarterback for Minnesota for about 4 weeks until J.J. McCarthy takes over. The highly drafted, not highly talented according to us, but the highly drafted quarterback out of Michigan is what the Minnesota Vikings are putting their future on. And they're going to hope that there's something there, right? They have a head coach there who has had playoff experience already in his young career, comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree, right? Kevin O'Connell, this is a guy who comes from that offensively minded coaching tree. So in theory, it's kind of funny, realistically. The Bears, you believe, have the quarterback, but not the head coach. The Vikings have a decent head coach, but maybe not the quarterback that you might be the most confident in. It's kind of funny if you kind of swap them. Maybe Kevin O'Connell is the future Bears coach. But no, in all seriousness, this is a team that is it's kind of all over the place, man. And I'll let my thoughts be known about them a little bit later. I want to get your boys' thoughts first. So, Justin, I'm going to throw it to you first, in fairness. You look up and down in the Minnesota Vikings depth chart. What do you see from this team going into 2024?
That's the big question, because the two major issues that they had last year were quarterback and defense. Did they do enough to address these issues? And there's a lot of, when you look up and down the roster, there's a lot of big names on this defense, but let's face it, they did lose their best defensive player in Danielle Hunter. They've added a lot of, depth pieces, and there's a lot of, I guess, hope that this defense could take a step forward from what it was last year, but I don't see them being a top defense unless some of these rookies step up, and there's a lot of young talent on that team. The real question then is if they can get some sort of semblance of defensive play, is Sam Darnold good enough to start them off the season? If not, is J.J. McCarthy good enough coming out of the backfield, coming out of the roster to do something in this league? I mean, J.J. McCarthy was one of the big question marks in this draft. Was he going to be good? Was he going to be a first-round pick? Was it all smoke? Do these teams really like him? Do they think that he's a pro-ready quarterback right now? And there's so many question marks around that team that it's hard to predict which direction they're going in. I mean, especially with the players they have. I mean, Aaron Jones at the tail end of his career. Is he going to be a running back there for a long period of time? Is there, hope that they could win something while they have him at the peak of his powers? TJ Hawkinson's coming off an injury. Justin Jefferson's coming off an injury. Jordan Addison had a great year last year, but can he capitalize on that? Can he have a second great year? Like, there's more questions than answers, I think, in Minnesota right now. And it's going to be very hard to predict which direction this schedule takes them, because it's not like they have the easiest schedule in the world. I mean, they in the first 5 weeks, they play San Francisco, both New York teams, Green Bay and Houston. That's not an easy schedule. I mean, even the Giants are going to get after you. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sitting here saying that the Giants are going to light the world on fire this year, but they're going to get after you. And do they have the right quarterback to call those pressures and call out those blitzes and things like that? Do they have the correct offensive line to get after? They're going to stack the box at first. I know they have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. There's a good chance that they're going to say, we'll let you have one or two, but we're going to get after you.
Yeah. You bring up the point with the schedule there, and let's just look at it. It's Giants, it's 49ers, it's Texans, it's Packers, and then it's Jets. And it's a bye week. And who are you facing coming out of the bye? Immediately, it's the Lions. And it's just this is a tough a tough schedule, to say the least, for Minnesota. And you bring up the Darnold McCarthy question. Are you? I mean, we could even go past that Lions game. There's a game against the Rams in there. We mentioned before that it's the AFC South and the NFC West that they're facing. So you have a game against the Jaguars in in one of the games after the Lions as well. I think week 10 or 11 range. The Rams, this is not an easy schedule, right, for Minnesota, despite finishing just third in the division last year. And it almost makes you wonder, you kind of just bring it up, guys, when are they going to make that switch? Are they going to wait till the bye week? Are they going to have to pull the trigger before? It's going to be a very interesting question, to say the very least, that needs to be answered. Rick, before I throw it over to you, I'll just give my thoughts about Minnesota. I'm just not too high on them this season. Whether it's Darnold or McCarthy himself, it's just there's not a quarterback there that I think can take the most advantage ultimately of the skill position talent. Justin Jefferson, who got his big contract extension this past year, we know what he brings to the table as the number one guy for this franchise. Jordan Addison, if he could stop, trying to become a Formula One driver, an IndyCar driver, he could actually be really good on the field. But he needs to give up the race car driving dream here soon enough. TJ Hawkinson with his consistency. This is actually even a solid offensive line, right? It's not spectacular, and I'm sure Vikings fans think it should be a lot better, but this is a decent enough offensive line. I think you have two tackles in Christian Darrisaw, and especially the right tackle, Brian O'Neill. Teams would kill to get some guys like that, right, as one of their bookend tackles. So you have that. But Justin kind of pointed out, man, it's the defense for me. And this is just spot starters everywhere. Jerry Tillery in the interior, Jonathan Bullard as one of the guys you hope to get pass rush from. Even this is a guy who I think I have a lot of questions for, just because last year was kind of the first big year for him. But Jonathan Grenner, right, from the Houston Texans, which is funny because Daniil Hunter went to the Texans, and then the Texans, one of their top sack guys, went to Minnesota. But the young guy, Ivan Pace Jr., a veteran, Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel, who was, a spot player for the Dolphins last year. Yeah, he had a play or two, but you can't. I always, and Rick knows this because we talk about this in hockey too. When role players ascend to starters, you sometimes see that there was a reason they were a role player, right? This is a team, and you mentioned some of the young guys there in the secondary, Justin. I think Cameron Bynum might be the safety opposite from Harrison Smith. I think he's kind of proven so far in his career that he can handle that. But then at corner, Andrew Booth Jr., at safety, Lewis Seen, some of these young draft picks the last few years, they just haven't developed. And whether it's because of play on the field or even, especially, I think injury is what screwed over Booth Jr. the most out of anything. They haven't panned out. And I just cannot be too confident in this team to really make that big of a leap. I just can't. So I don't think there's much improvement for Minnesota, and I think there's a lot of room for regression for this team, to say the very least. So, Rick, I'll let you have final words on Minnesota.
So, my wife has an uncle who is a Vikings fan, and I talked to him briefly, as you can hear the laughing in the background going on over there, because she knows what I'm about to say. I spoke to him about the draft, and he said to me, "Well, I mean, we know this is going to be a bad year, so I'm fine with it." Now, granted, is that a little bit of conjecture? Maybe, but I think he's got a point. The best unit on this team, I believe, is their offensive line, because I think Garrett Bradbury, Christian Darrisaw, Dalton Risner. If you want to throw in Michael Juergens there, so be it, because that's who we are in the show. But I think that's the best unit they've got, is that offensive line. The most consistent unit, I'll say, is that offensive line. Remember a couple of years ago when you and I were doing the NFC North, I was talking about how Christian Darrisaw was the 20th. They were the 22nd best line because Darrisaw was just not very good. He's gotten a lot better. So that is the one key, I think, for them, is that if their offensive line can perform well enough to keep Darnold or McCarthy upright, they'll be fine. But that's the problem, is that, like Justin said, look at this schedule, because it's not only the fact of the matter that, once you get past the Giants, their defensive line, which is just maulers upon maulers, you have a gamut of four of the best teams, including the Jets. You're playing them in Tottenham. You're going to England to play them. You come off the bye after 2 weeks off to play the Lions, and then that Rams game is Thursday night. So you've got a very short break after playing your division rival in the Lions. So that's the question. When do you start J.J. McCarthy? I don't know if there is a right answer to that question this season, because this schedule is just nightmarish. Maybe depending on how Darnold is, you start him the Rams game because maybe the Rams might be a little step down on their defense because no Aaron Donald. But look, I'm trying to in my head I'm trying to think touchdowns or felony convictions. What will the Vikings have more of this year? And I'm not 100% certain on the touchdowns, but I'm leaning towards that. But I'm not 100% sure. I agree with you guys in that there is room for regression, significant regression, and not to mention too, one of the things that the Vikings are so snake bit on, or how about I label them, the Fraud Kings are so snake bit on, is their special teams. Go through the litany of kickers they've had since Gary Anderson missed that kick that could have gotten in the Super Bowl in '99. Well, this year, their two kickers on their roster are Will Richard, the rookie out of Alabama, or John Parker Romo, who was the 2023 XFL Kicker of the Year and has bounced around between 3 NFL practice squad since. And their punter was an undrafted kid, Ryan Wright. I'm telling you, it's going to be rough. This is a rough go of it for this squad. And, it's unfortunate, but I think you're going to see some guys lose their jobs over this. I don't know about Kevin O'Connell per se, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Pettin loses his job, the assistant head coach and the outside linebacker coach. I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone. Brian Flores, I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone either. I mean, this is gonna be a really bad year in Minnesota for them, to the point where I think you could see this team picking in the top 5 of next year's draft. And again, look, that could be good for them because that could mean, hey, let's add Travis Hunter to this wide receiver room with Justin Jefferson, and that would be a real nightmare for the NFC North. But every team at some point has to go through a bad year, and unfortunately, the wheel has fallen on the Vikings, and the sword has fallen on their good hopes for this season. I think this is not going to be a good year for them at all.
This is kind of an out there question, but it popped in my brain as you brought up the schedule again, Rick, and the idea of McCarthy.
Yeah.
Will this be the first time since I think the other two guys I could think of are Rodgers and Palmer? Is this going to be the first time a rookie QB drafted in the first round doesn't play a majority of his rookie season?
Well, Jordan Love didn't play. He was the first rounder.
Fair. I forget about that.
Well, so that's the thing is that the problem is that Sam Darnold isn't consistent enough for me to say that he won't get hurt at some point. And then what are you telling me? You're telling me that Nick Mullins or Jaron Hall are above the depth chart over J.J. McCarthy? I don't think they are. Mullins maybe, but I think if Darnold gets hurt and McCarthy's not ready, you go to Mullins first. But that's a big indictment on a guy that you traded around for, to get at the number 10 overall pick. That's a big indictment that he's not ready for it just yet. So you have to go to another backup quarterback before you go to him. Yeah, I look, I don't think I don't know per se where I see him going, but I don't trust Darnold to stay healthy enough to be able to be consistent. I will say one thing though. I will try and give one positive for the Vikings. I think Dallas Turner's got a shot for Rookie of the Year honors. I really do. I really think that he's got a really good motor. He's got a high ceiling for the way that he plays. I think that was a great pick by them in the middle of that first round. But again, one player does not make a team better. He'll have some outstanding plays, and he might fit in really well. He might start a brand new Purple People Eaters in the linebacking core, but that's pretty much it for him.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's going to be something to say at the very least. I don't know, man. It's just I'm not looking for it. If I was a Vikings fan, I would not be happy in any way, shape, or form, to say the very least. Yeah. If I'm a Vikings fan, at least just going into like an overall team record this season, like you said, maybe Dallas Turner, get him going early. Next to Grinner, maybe the two of them could do a little something, show some kind of pass rush for you this year. I mean, if you're the way to protect the secondary is to get the pass rush, and maybe that's going to be the key to Minnesota if they do surprise people. You mentioned Brian Flores there, Rick, and he will probably have to be a key to this defense playing well. If his side of the ball isn't performing well, if his position guys aren't doing good, it's not going to be a smooth year in Minnesota, to say the very least. And you kind of mentioned, I'm almost wondering now at this point, how many quarterbacks are they going to carry on the roster? Because you mentioned Sam Darnold, who's not necessarily been the picture of health in the past. You have a J.J. McCarthy, who he's a young rookie, right, and kind of thin, relatively speaking. So, what is his durability going to be like once he starts taking NFL hits?
Yep.
You have Nick Mullins, who, correct me if I'm wrong, I think even he's been injured at least once in his career.
He has. And Jaron Hall last year, the kid out of BYU that drafted the year prior, he was concussed at one point last year. Yeah.
Wasn't it during his first start? He got concussed during his first.
Yes, it was.
This Vikings room cannot stay up to save anything. The Ravens running back room is basically the Vikings quarterback room.
Yep.
Equal wise into health. So this is going to be something to say the very least.
I never thought I'd be saying this as someone. If you're a Vikings fan, you're going to say, "Where's Joshua Dobbs? We need him back at this point." But,
right? You know what? Maybe. Wait, where is Josh Dobbs actually? I forget.
San Francisco.
San Francisco?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is he the next project for Kyle Shanahan to make wonder of? If Brock Purdy gets a little bit injured, dinged up for a game or two.
I mean, he could be a guy that sits on there and is like, "Hey, who needs a quarterback? We'll trade him for you for a nice mid-round draft pick." Tennessee. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if Tennessee will trade for him, considering like a couple years ago, didn't he kind of blow their shot at the AFC South because in that Jags game?
It's still Tennessee. What good decisions have they made in the last 5 years? They have one in Derrick Henry. Let's be honest.
Fair. You know what? Fair point. Although that could have also very much been Derrick Henry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Vamos. To the next team, the surprise team to an extent, the Green Bay Packers. Surprise team of last year, not so much this year. Ladies and gentlemen, the Green Bay Packers finished second in. Yes, Justin. Before I continue my intro,
Who was surprised? Not me.
There you go.
I told you.
That's right. He had them pretty high up there. That's
I
true.
told you. I said that defense is nasty, and if you get any semblance of play out of Jordan Love, even if he was middle of the pack, that team was going to make a wild card spot.
Well, but a semblance of play. I agree with that. I don't think we expected Jordan Love to have the second half that he had, and
he was above and beyond my expectations for sure. But everyone had that team being bad, that team being a top 10 pick, and they were in the NFC Championship game.
Divisional. They lost to San Francisco.
They were like a couple plays out of the NFC Championship game.
Yes, they were a couple plays away. Yeah, you're right.
So
right. This will be interesting to say the very least. Can year two, technically, because year two as a starter, year 5 in the NFL, they sat him for several years. Can year 2 of the Jordan Love era continue to show that? Or was last year a bit of lightning in a bottle and not necessarily the full story of what we might think? Who knows what it'll be, but that's what we try to predict going into 2024. The Green Bay Packers, LaFleur and Jordan Love, the duo there for year 2 of this time. Jordan Love, like Rick was saying, especially even more so, I think, than the Packers, surprised a lot of people last season just with his ability to not turn over the ball necessarily. He had a lot of clean games last season. Well, what was it towards the end of last year? He had like a 8-game stretch of 0 interceptions in that time.
Yeah.
So he very much took care of the ball. It was a balanced running attack that he was able to rely on last year with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones is not there any longer. A.J. Dillon is still there, but even A.J. Dillon, at least on the ESPN depth chart, they're listing him as the 3rd stringer for some reason after a couple of years as the 2nd stringer because they're putting Marshawn Lloyd, a young kid out of USC, I believe, in front of him. But we know who running back 1 is. The free agent acquisition, Josh Jacobs, signing with the Green Bay Packers in the offseason. It's going to be very interesting to say the very least. It's a solid offensive line that's returning. Really, I think consistency for the offensive line of the Packers is going to be key. Can't really say too much about David Bakhtiari not being there because, he played 5 snaps last season for them?
Yeah.
It feels like he was a non-factor for Jordan Love's first year behind center. So I don't think that necessarily matters whatsoever. It's going to be Ken Rashid Walker, or if it ends up being Jordan Morgan. I think as of now it has Walker as the starter, so we're just going to go with that. Walker with Jenkins and Myers there. That's actually a pretty good, guard center combo right there between those two. You have a couple guys that you can rely on. Can the offensive line be as good as it was last season? If not, maybe a little bit better. For me, and I know I'll leave this to Justin when we get to him because I know Justin praised the defense last year, and there's plenty to praise about this defense once again this year. When you look at Jair Alexander, Xavier McKinney, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, there's talent right there. But to me, the thing that's going to make or break this Packers season is honestly, can the young guys in this wide receiving room, A, stay healthy, and B, break out? Christian Watson has been a little bit banged up in the first couple of years of his career so far. He's had his moments where he's shown up, right? He's had flashes, but he needs to put it together for a full game more often and then a full season. Romeo Dobbs is another guy who I do like, right? I do like Romeo Dobbs. I was big on him coming out. And I think, once again, the guy had some really great moments last year. I think, did he cross 100? What 100? Did he cross 1,000 yards or did he flirt with it? I forget off the top of my head.
He crossed 1,000 yards career, but no, he was 699.
Okay, so maybe there was like a stretch where I thought he was flirting with it. But Romeo Dobbs had a solid year too. Probably more of the touchdown machine is one thing. I think he had like a 2 or 3 touchdown game last year is probably what I was thinking of. And then Jaden Reed kind of coming out of nowhere even for this team. To me, the make or break, as good as the scheming of LaFleur is, and they still have, I think there's still the potential there because this was one of Justin's points last year, the support of the running game. If you believe the support of the running game is going to be there, right, with Jacobs, Lloyd, and Dillon, to me, the make or break is this wide receiving core. If this wide receiving core can take a massive leap up and help out Jordan Love even more, I think this Packers team has a more than legitimate shot at challenging the Lions. But if we're going to get more of inconsistency, if we're going to get more of Christian Watson has to miss a game or two here because of calf strain, or Romeo Dobbs has to miss a game or two here because of his ankle, then I think it's going to fall a bit short. Because I think Jordan Love is looked really good. How many seasons can a guy play above what his wide receiving core can? Now, the answer is multiple. Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, he's shown that in the past. Can Jordan Love do that? Maybe, but we just need to see it, I think. But that's my number one X factor going in for the Packers season. Can the skill position group rise up to the level of what Jordan Love showed you he could potentially do last year? If so, this Packers team is even levels above dangerous than what we're already going to give them credit for. If not, it's going to be tough for them to really, really contend. And I mean contend at the higher level, which they want to this year. So that's my ultimate X factor. Rick, your thoughts on the Packers?
Let me first highlight and enhance your point with a point about Jordan Love. In 2018, as a sophomore, he led his Utah State college team to an 11-2 record, and they were ranked 22nd in the AP poll. He threw for 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. The next year, a lot of the guys that he played with had graduated and moved on, so he had a brand new team. They went 7-6. He threw 17 picks and 20 touchdowns with 3,400 passing yards. So after a really good year, he had a come down year the next year. And I understand it's Utah State, it's the Mountain West, but there's a key cog that you forgot on the offensive line who's no longer there. John Runyon is gone. So that's a guard that was a steady presence for them, and he's no longer there. So now you have to rely on Jenkins, who has been very good, but Royce Newman is probably their other guard. He's only started 24 games, played in 51, so he's been more of a backup and more of an injury replacement than he has been a consistent starter on that line for Green Bay. And I think another big key for them is that they have Xavier McKinney. They got him in free agency from the Giants, so he can be there to really help that secondary room, like you mentioned with Jair Alexander there, Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon. They've got some good pieces all around, but you're right. This is a team that is still so young, and you're still so not sure. Like even like Jaden Reed, I think Jaden Reed had 750 receiving yards at the end of last season. He was close for coming out of nowhere, but he's not a number one. Christian Watson's supposed to be your number one, but he cannot stay on the field to a whole season, if I have a season even. So that's the question mark that I have. I think this Packers team can still be good, but I'm going to spoil it a little bit here. The reason why I don't think I have them being able to compete with Detroit is because I have Detroit just that much better in every category than Green Bay at the moment. I think the Packers are a very good team. I think they will be in the wild card conversation once again. I think Josh Jacobs will have a better year. I think he'll go back over 1,000 yards because he was like 800 plus with Vegas in his final year last year. I think he's a very talented running back, and he will fit very well in LaFleur's system. And I think the Packers defense will keep them in a lot of games. I think they'll be able to win games consistently. That's part of the reason why I have them winning week 1 in Brazil against the Eagles. I love this Packers defense and that matchup against the Eagles offense that, are they officially back? There's a lot of pressure on them. The Packers defense is probably just going to swallow them up. So I love that matchup there. But as you go on further down the line, you got the Niners, the Lions, the Texans and the Jaguars, teams that have other prolific offenses that, this Packers defense, if they get tired really easily, it'll be a track meet going against them. So I believe this Packers team has good enough talent to be able to consistently make a good run. But I don't know about being number one in this division. I think that they are stuck at number two. And I do think this is going to be a little bit of a regression year for Jordan Love. I do. I think now people have seen tape on him. They now understand who he is and what he can do. And I think that, that's going to hurt him in the long run. I think he'll still be a very good quarterback, but he might not get 4,200 passing yards. It might be like 4,000 even, or it might be 3,900. I think it'll be a little bit of a regression for him because I think defenses will now figure him out and know how to game plan for him better.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's funny to say this is, are we going to see a sophomore slump out of a guy that is in year 5? But that's kind of the case here, right? Like, this is his second year starting, and this is basically it. So I think that I think, and that's why I said the wide receivers are the key to me, because I think Jordan Love, and look, I have been easily the person most critical on the show in the past of Jordan Love. And I'll stand by what I said. The first 3 years, there wasn't a lot of hope based off all the reports we saw. So this is, I'm just going to reiterate my point kind of to what you said, Rick. I think the wide receivers are the key to me. And if we do see a regression out of Jordan Love, I think the conversation will then be, is that regression because of the receivers and not playing up to a high level? Is that regression because of Jordan Love? It's going to be that conversation. But we mainly talked about the offense, Rick, and we both already given hints at the defense. Justin, of course you could talk about the offense, but the defense is what you pointed out last year. I'm sure you're going to point out the magnificence of this defense again. Why can this defense give the Green Bay Packers a legitimate shot in 2024?
They're young, they're fast, and they get after it. I think they're well coached, and I think that this defense, not only are they very hard to score on, but they are very good at making the big play. But that's not what I'm worried about this year. I mean, like I said, I like the defense. I think they added some good pieces too. I think there's some depth there. The defense isn't any different than last year. The question is, Rick is right. Is this offense going to get going early, or are they going to get going, or are they going to, fall apart? And the wide receiver room is a big question mark. I mean, I love the upside of a lot of those young guys. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks had a great year last year filling in for some of these guys. But can they stay healthy? Can they stay on the field? Can they have consistent production is the major, major question mark we have here in Green Bay. And it's going to be the difference between having an 8-9 season or a 10-7 season. It's really going to come down to the play on offense for these guys, because that was their biggest issue last year. Jordan Love did all this, and he didn't really have a consistent player at wide receiver. If you remember, like, all of a sudden Romeo Doubs was like lighting things up in the beginning of the season. Then he was out. They had to bring in other guys. Then Jaden Reed was doing well, and Christian Watson came back, and Christian Watson was lighting up, and these guys went down. And then all of a sudden you had to have Dontavian Wicks come up. And don't get me wrong, Wicks is a good player, but he's their fourth receiver now. When are you going to have that consistency on offense to keep this offense humming at a good level? I don't know if we know what the best season Jordan Love can have at this point, because, I mean, even in the run game, Aaron Jones missed extended time last year. A.J. Dillon was not healthy every game last year. There was a lot of question marks, and there's a lot of things that I think need to be resolved in this season. And they benefit from being a wild card team. They really do have an opportunity schedule-wise to capitalize on what is a good young team this year. It's going to be interesting to see if they can actually pull it off, because I think the Lions have a much harder schedule than they do.
Right. And that makes sense apropos of the fact that the Lions won the division last year. So there are extra games that they get that are aside the two divisions that everyone in the NFC North is facing is going to be on paper tougher teams comparatively. But, this Packers team, like you said, I almost wonder, because of wondering on the offense, if it will be on the defense to take it up that even higher level, like you said, Justin. Like, they got the guns to be able to do this, right? You have the veterans to get you the pass rush in a Preston Smith and a Rashawn Gary, who Preston Smith, man, like aging like a fine wine. Like he is doing something, to say the very least, and showing off that he is going to be a very good sack production player as his career continues. Young guys like Lucas Van Ness, who you hope to get a little bit more out of in year 2, I believe. Devontae Wyatt and Quay Walker, two guys that you're hoping for bigger leaps out of in year 3. Jair Alexander, the leader, right? Hopefully they officially make him a captain so he doesn't go out there when he's not a captain, right? You remember that little scuffle that happened. But him being really the captain of the secondary alongside Xavier McKinney and younger guys in Bullard and Eric Stokes. I really want to see, and I'm really questioning, Eric Stokes, I think he was solid last year. Can he continue that up? And can Stokes really solidify the number 2 corner spot next to Alexander? I'm not saying he hasn't earned it, right? I'm not saying that, but is he that, like Eric Stokes when he was drafted, his number 1 thing was speedy guy. Can he play his role? I think he played his role great last season. Can he continue that going into, I want to say year 3 or 4, if I'm not mistaken? So it'll be interesting to say the very least, and what we see more out of him going into 2024. Last question. I feel like I've rarely asked this kind of question, but I think with the Packers, it actually makes sense. Do you guys see the potential? This could be a quick yes or no. Do you guys see the potential? And they rarely do this, so this is why I think this is an interesting question. The Packers being a player at the trade deadline for some skill position help if it's potentially available. Open question. And I ask this because, like I said, at the trade deadline, they've shown in the past they don't make that big move, right? But if the receiving core is fine, but not great, is this a different management and is this a different pulse on the situation where maybe they should go after a skill position guy?
I don't think they do. One, because of the history and the way that the Green Bay Packers are run, but I don't necessarily know that there's going to be a player available that is worth going out there and taking away, because this is such a young team. Picking up DeAndre Hopkins is not going to put you over the top if the Tennessee Titans are bad. And maybe it's a slight improvement, but you're taking away from guys that have chemistry, have the ability to grow, and have proven that they can do things in big spots. I mean, again, they were, a couple plays away from beating what ended up being the Super Bowl team from the NFC and playing against the Chiefs this year. So, because who knows, they could have even beaten the Lions in that situation, but that's a different argument. But yeah, I don't think it's worth the assets, the way that they've been drafting, the way that they've been building, to go out and trade for a guy like that. And it is just so far and away from what the Packers actually are and what they do and what they've had success with that I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the Jets want to give Allen Lazard back, that could work out in their favor, I think. but no, other than that hypothetical just humdrum scenario, Justin's right. The Packers are not that type of team to move at the deadline like that. I think, I don't see that being the case, because I don't think that's how. And this is not a different regime; it's the same regime, and that's just the Packer way. Is that they're not going to. Unless they're truly blown away at the deadline by an offer or by, a team that has a really good player that they want, but I don't see that happening. I think Adam Thielen could be having a great season in Carolina, and they still won't touch it because that's just not who they are. They're going to rely on their homegrown drafted talent to kind of push them through. And I mean, look, Donald Driver and Devontae Adams weren't mid-season replacements. They had their bumps, they grew, they picked up, and they became better receivers in the Green Bay mold. So they have history on their side of saying, we've done it this way, it's worked. Let's just put the faith back in these guys, and who knows, maybe Bo Melton will have a 500-yard second half of the season. Be better than he is. Who knows?
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see, to say the very least, what is going to happen in Green Bay, in Lambeau. And what they could potentially do. I mean, obviously, what they could potentially do and what they'll be trying to do is unseat the team that won the NFC North division last year, the team that made it to the NFC Championship game. And this is going to be interesting, to say the very least. The last team we're going to be talking about today, ladies and gentlemen, the Detroit Lions. I gave the preamble before we started talking about the division of this team. Once again, winning the division for the first time since 1993, the first time they won the NFC North since the realignment, and the first NFC Championship game appearance for the organization since 1991. A banner year for Detroit last season. And how much better can it get? I mean, there's realistically only like one or two things that could happen. Either A, they just make it to the Super Bowl, or B, they win the Super Bowl next year. That's literally the only way it could get better next season for Detroit.
Yeah.
So can they do that? Let's see. This is a Detroit team that is bringing back a lot of the similar players from an offensive skill position group, right? This is actually an offense that, for the most part, is relatively kept together. Jared Goff, who got a contract extension during the offseason. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is the running back duo once again. Kind of questioning and wondering, if Jahmyr Gibbs is going to maybe get a little bit more this time, but we'll see what they do there. Probably more of a balanced attack. Well, once again, a balanced attack is what we'll see this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the definitive number one on this team. Can Jamison Williams and Khalif Raymond and Donovan Peoples-Jones be support? We'll see. Sam Laporta was phenomenal last season in his rookie year. Yeah, rookie year, the kid absolutely popped off. We'll see what more can he do. Can he show us even more than what he did in year one? And then an offensive line that is returning a majority of its starters. I think the main guy is just, I forget his first name, but I think Jackson was one of their guards last year. He went off to the Rams in the offseason, but they brought in Zeitler, who was pretty good in 2023 as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see, to say the very least. But this is a predominantly put together similar offense. And now we're going to see if they can do it once again in 2024. And this is a defense that Aiden Hutchinson is the definitive guy in the pass rush, who is going to be there next to him that is going to help cause havoc. They brought in a young guy in Marcus Davenport. Maybe they could get something out of him that hasn't been gotten out of so far in his career. Jack Campbell as linebacker, a guy who, again, I'll admit, critical of last year. Didn't see a lot of positives about him going into the draft, but the kid completely proved a lot of things wrong in his rookie campaign. We'll see if he can continue that this season. And then this is a defensive backfield. This is probably actually the part of the team that got the most differences, boys, because they traded for Carlton Davis III in the offseason, and they drafted Terry and Arnold. So those are two brand new fresh faces to the secondary here for the team in 2024. And Ennis Rakestraw Jr. is a guy who maybe he'll be able to sneak in some playing time here and there for this team. So this is a team, a lot of consistency, but a couple new faces as well going into the 2024 campaign. Justin, Detroit last year, they won the division. They're going to be favorite, and they were a favorite going into last year as well. They're going to be a favorite once again. There's going to be a lot of faith and a lot of hope for the Lions this season, both from Detroit fans themselves and even some pundits. What about this Lions team do you think is the X factor to make 2023 a good year, but that can make 2024 a great year?
The secondary. It's got to be the secondary. Look, I mean, obviously you want Amon-Ra St. Brown to stay healthy. That's a major thing for them offensively. They did have some issues with depth at receiver last year. Laporta had a great year. Jahmyr Gibbs really stepped up. David Montgomery had a career year. But their issue, in my mind, was not on offense. It was on defense and their porous passing attack, the same way it was last year. Last year, the year before, we said they really got to fix that secondary. They signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Unfortunately, he got hurt during the year. There was a lot of things that we thought they were going to improve in, and I think they were a bottom 5 team against the pass last year. They gave up how many passing touchdowns? Let's see. I have it right here. 28 passing touchdowns. It's a lot. It's not the worst in the league, but, it's not good. They got to be a better passing defense, especially in today's league, and especially if you want to be the team that unseats the Chiefs, because you got to stop Patrick Mahomes. That's what these teams need to be working towards. I love this Lions team. On paper, yes, they should probably win the division again this year, even with a tougher schedule than the Packers. But there are holes that they're not going to get past a certain step without fixing. And you saw the issue that the Eagles had with it last year, because the Eagles, as good as they were against the pass the year before when they made the Super Bowl, it was a major issue last year when they had lost depth pieces like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And now they're going back and fixing it because of how big of an issue it was. It was a major, major need that the Eagles fixed this past year. The Lions made some moves, but can they put these pieces together, and can they coach this defense into becoming even middle of the pack? You don't have to be the best passing defense to win a Super Bowl. It helps, But there are plenty of teams that have had rough passing defenses, middle of the pack passing defenses, and made it to the promised land. This team needs to take a step forward in that department.
They added Deshae Townsend as their defensive back coach. He was on Jacksonville last year, let go, and then they added him. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion who's got 21 picks in his career, which it's interesting to me that, like, Aaron Glenn is their defensive coordinator, and the issue that they have is in the secondary. It's so interesting that a guy who, made his bread and butter as a defensive ball hawk who had 41 picks in his entire NFL career hasn't been able to figure out how to coach a defensive backfield in a way that I think you would expect a guy like him to do so. So maybe having Deshae Townsend there as their passing game coordinator will help them out. That's, I think, a smart hire by Dan Campbell to make that move there. Jerg, you forgot Ennis Rakestraw, the other guy they drafted in the secondary. I know we both love Ennis Rakestraw.
I mentioned him very briefly. Yes, I did. I said Ennis Rakestraw.
It maybe briefly, but you got to expand upon that because he's another guy who could be an absolute monster. But again, this is a team that, it is that secondary. I mean, their offensive line, with Ragnow, with Glasgow, with Decker, they added Kevin Zeitler, who was a Pro Bowl tackle last year from the Ravens. They put him on a 1-year deal. Jameson Williams, for all the flack that I gave him in his first year for not playing 6 games because of the gambling, he's proven to be a capable gadget receiver. Love Sam Laporta. Love Jack Campbell when all of you rubes didn't. I was a very high on that pick because I thought that he was going to be a great player. Brian Branch is phenomenal for this team. Carlton Davis is there. But, Justin's right. It is that secondary and it is that defensive line because who is going to be next to Aiden Hutchinson? Well, they added DJ Reader from the Bengals in free agency. They drafted Mekhi Wingo out of LSU. They have Josh Paschal as well and Broderick Martin. I think they have role players to make up a defensive line around Hutchinson. They have role linebackers around Jack Campbell. They still have Jalen Reeves-Maybin, Alex Anzalone, Marcus Davenport. They've got a number of names that are there on the defense. I think this is a team that, unlike the Packers, I think that if they see a guy at the deadline who they want to add to shore up a spot, they will go get him. Because I believe that the Lions kind of see the writing on the wall here. I think they see this is their best chance to continue to be a solid team that will be a top 2 team in this conference and gun for that Super Bowl. But that window is closing. The windows don't stay open forever, man. I mean, look, it's not so much because the guys are old, it's because contracts are coming up. Now we're in year 2 of these rookie deals of Gibbs and Laporta and Campbell and Branch. You can't keep all of them. Or if you can, you have to do some major gymnastics elsewhere financially to figure out how to keep all these guys on the deals that they expect and deserve. And then, I think that's kind of where we are, is that the Lions, I think, are in year 2 of, I would say, a 3 to 4 year window of let's go win now. Let's bring a title home to the Motor City because it's starting. I will beat the drum of Jared Goff being a great quarterback. 30,000 career yards passing, but what does he have to show in the postseason? 1 Super Bowl where they only scored 3 points, and then a postseason where it wasn't his fault that Josh Reynolds dropped passes and that Dan Campbell went for it on 4th down. But, ultimately in a quarterback-driven league, you are the guy that's the target of all of that. So I think this is a very good Lions team. I think it's built the right way, and I think that they're very stacked in a lot of places. But Justin's point, when you look at their schedule and you see in the first 4 weeks, you have the Rams, you have Stafford, who had a really good season last year, who they beat in the playoffs barely. The Bucks, Baker, who was very good last year. The Cardinals with Kyler, who can really make things move. And again, that game's in Arizona. And then you have the Seahawks at home for future Ring of Honor candidate Geno Smith, of course. And then you have a bye, which means that from week 6 to week 18, much like, I forget who we talked about last week, you have 12 games where you have got to stay healthy, and you're playing Dallas, Green Bay twice, Houston, Jacksonville, Indy. Oh, let's not forget Buffalo and San Francisco. It is a rough schedule. Can the Lions overcome it? I think so. I think they'll win enough in other places to survive some of those tougher games. But Not if they're not healthy, and not if this defense can put teams to a point where they won't score 30 a night. Because if it's a track meet, eventually the Lions will run out of steam, and the Packers are, in that scenario, right there to steal the division away from them.
How often does it happen that a team is having all of their playoff games be rematches the next year? Just strictly speaking on the conference side.
I think this is a wonderful job by the scheduling crew to like make this happen for the Lions. Whereas we ragged on them for the Vikings schedule being just absolute murder.
Yeah.
This is like, these are all the matches we want to see. So, I just want to know why some of them, why they're not all flexed to Sunday night right now. Because that Lions Cowboys game in October is a 4:25 game. Like, come on, make that the 8:00 game.
Yeah. So you guys mentioned it, and hey, I got to ask this question with the Packers. I think I'll ask this again with the Lions because I think this is even more. You guys bring up the secondary. I 100% agree, and the defensive line as well. I think Jameson Williams' breakout campaign is also going to be a big X factor for this team, and having that number 2 next to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So to you guys, do you see? I'm not going to ask anything specific like I kind of did with the Packers in terms of maybe getting a wide receiver, but do you guys think the Lions could be the aggressors this year? Because you mentioned it, Rick. This is probably year 2 of a good 3-4 year window that windows don't last forever. Not every single team is going to be the Patriots and have a 15 to 20 year run. It just doesn't happen like that in sports. That's not the average one that you might think. At best, sometimes you get 6 or 7 years, So if you're Detroit, do you this year, I'll ask for next year, but do you this year get aggressive at the trade deadline to try to look at one of these team needs and fix it? I won't be specific on which need, but just in your opinion.
Absolutely. I think that I'm not necessarily going to say it's a wide receiver because I think that they're set there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's anybody on the offensive side of the ball. I really don't. I think if they have someone aggressive in mind on defense, like I'll give you a clear example for me that I'm thinking of. Let's say that my predictions hit and the Saints defense is good, but the Saints are a terrible team. The Lions might go calling on New Orleans and say, somebody from your secondary or somebody from your D-line, if they're available, we'll take them. Maybe you do add a Chase Young to an Aiden Hutchinson on the defensive line, or maybe you try and get one of these other really good young cornerbacks or safeties to really shore up, because while Kirby Joseph is good, Brandon Joseph is a bit of an unknown, and so I think those are the 2 areas that I would target are defensive line and secondary for them, just because that's where I see their deficiencies being. Secondary, they got a lot of depth, but the depth isn't exactly there. Kindle Vildor does not strike fear into my heart. He doesn't. But the defensive line, it's not really, there's not a lot of depth there, and you're relying on guys who have some injury history. DJ Reader's not been very healthy in the past couple of years. So maybe you go out and get another guy on the D-line to kind of help out with that. But I see the Lions being aggressive, and I see those are the 2 areas that I would see.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Of course, they're going to hope that maybe Marcus Davenport could put something together here and, career of a former first-round pick, and he'd do something. He did have a 9-sack season a couple years ago in 2021 with the Saints. If they could get something like that out of him, that would be a massive boon for this team for 2024. But no, I'm kind of with you, Rick. This is going to be a Lions team. Right now, even the GM and the pro scouts of this team are just looking at teams around the league that are projected to be bad, or maybe a team or 2 that if they have a bad start, and there's a guy or 2 that they don't think they'll keep long-term, right? Like, imagine one of these teams that we think is competing for the wild card, but they don't have that good of a 2024. If you think you're going to lose a guy in free agency, why keep him? Why not trade him, get some draft picks back? I think the Lions, like you have said, that's why I asked it for both them and the Packers, but I especially think the Lions will be the ones aggressive enough to make that transaction happen more so, because I think this is a team that's going to be more than willing, to become aggressive at this trade deadline if the opportunity presents itself. If they don't, then could you argue maybe were they not aggressive enough? Maybe just the right deal wasn't in place. Whatever you want to say, this is going to be a Lions team that I think is going to be aggressive both on and off the field with how they attack both 2024 and 2025, to say the least. Justin, your thoughts on the trade deadline idea, and then you can give the final word on the Lions going into 2024.
I agree. I mean, they're the opposite of the Packers right now. They're not the youngest team in the league. They have good players, and they are maybe a piece away from, really competing. So I do expect them to be aggressive. They're an aggressive team to begin with. They're aggressive in every facet of the NFL story. They're aggressive in free agency. They're aggressive on the field. They're aggressive with their coaching style. They're an aggressive team, and I expect them to make a move if that move presents itself. So I don't think they're going to force it. Maybe it's not there, but if you're telling me they go out there and they make a trade and they really try and, pump up this team during the final half of the season to really make that next step, yeah, I'm all aboard this. This is exactly what I expect, and I expect this team to make some noise this year.
Yeah, and a real chance. This could kind of be the last thing we just idea about this Lions team, because remember, guys, for again those of you that are new to our NFL division breakdowns, once we go over the final division in the AFC, the next show after that will be us giving our playoff teams in each conference and our wild card teams. This Lions team has a real shot at competing for the top seed in the NFC. They were extremely close to it last year. I think they're going to be just as close to it again this year. And imagine the NFC having to run through Motor City.
Yeah,
that is a prospect that I think. I don't want to say top of the importance, because at the end of the day, obviously you want to win the Super Bowl more than anything. But if that is a legitimate goal that they could achieve, I think they'll go for it. And having home field advantage throughout the entire playoffs, it doesn't mean you're going to win necessarily 100% of the time, but it helps. So will be very interesting going forward. All right, that completes our full breakdown on each team in the division. But before we finish off the show, get to our final segment, which the people know and love, we are going to, of course, go and give our 4 through 1 for this conference. So just like we've done the last couple of weeks and like we will continue to do, we will start from the bottom and work our way to the top. Start this off with the Podfather first. Rick, who do you think will be the 4th seed in the NFC North for the 2024 season? What's your prediction?
Well, I have this team winning 3 games this year, 3-14. I don't have them winning a game until week 8. That would be the Minnesota Vikings. I think this it's brutal. Thank you, babe. It's brutal. But this early schedule is a nightmare for them to get through. And once they get through it, they will not be a good team. They could probably be a seller at the deadline for me, I think. But I don't know, man. I don't think the schedule makers were not kind to them. And it's going to show. This is a team that's porous. They've got a lot of holes on defense. And also, funny little quirk, by the way, from my scheduling, I have them not winning a game at home this year.
Really?
Yeah, I have them not defending U.S. Bank Stadium. 0-9 this year at U.S. Bank Stadium.
So maximum pain for Minnesota this year. Not only will they only win 3 games, none of them will be at home.
Maximum pain for the Fraud Kings, yes.
Whew, that's tough.
Yeah.
Justin, who do you have as your 4th?
The Vikings, but not
3 wins.
3 wins and no home wins. I don't think it's going to be a great year for them, but I think that there are pieces there that will not allow them to be in that position, namely on offense. So I have them more along the lines of 5 or 6 wins, taking a step back. I don't know how that defense is going to do, but I do know that offense will probably still be humming, even if it is Sam Darnold behind center there. You saw them win games in absolute shambles last year, and I don't think that that's going to change this year. I think that there are some bad teams on that schedule, and they will get some more than 3 wins, Rick. Just got to throw it out there.
I'll complete this right here. A nice little hat trick of the 4th seed in the division, probably the 3rd as well. But Minnesota to me is the 4th. Now, I don't have them at 3 wins either. I think the last couple of years have shown that unless you're the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears the year before that, it's really hard to get less than 4 wins in this league sometimes, unless you're really, really bad. I don't know if the Vikings are you're basically saying they're only 1 win better than last year's Panthers squad, and I just don't know if they're only 1 win better than the Panthers last year. I'd be willing to give them a second one.
Yeah, again, I looked at the schedule and I looked at the teams that they're facing, and I think that there's improvements in other spots, but I also think that early stretch for them is such a killer that's going to probably, in my mind, that if I started the year 0-4 or 0-6 going into a bye, I wouldn't be very happy, and I wouldn't be looking forward to the rest of the games either. So that might be a case where you might see more of those guys getting some felony convictions and DUIs for speeding and whatnot.
So they don't have to deal with the rest of the season.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. I will continue with the third seed. I got the Chicago Bears. I think that the youth movement of this team, combined with the solid veterans that they do have in place, I think that can get them just above the Minnesota Vikings in the standings. How much above is the ultimate question, but I think it will be enough to give them the third seed in the division, which, I mean, if we're going off the idea of progress, it's technically more progress than last year, right? Like, they were fourth technically, and this year they go third. So I got the Bears being third in the division for me.
Well, I'm going to surprise you a little bit here. I do have the Bears as well, but I have them at 9-8. I have this Bears team actually taking a good step forward here. I believe the mixture of the veterans that they have in their receiving room, plus the combination of like what they've done, I think this is going to be a solid year for Caleb Williams. I think we're going to get back to that Heisman Trophy run. I like this team, man. I think this is a good unit. I think they're put together. I think 9-8 is going to be enough to keep Eberflus around, even if it's not what the Bears fans want. But hey, a winning season in Chicago. When was the last time you had that you didn't have to deal with a double doink? So 9-8 for Chicago, but third place in the division, and ultimately not making the postseason.
I mean, that's competing for a wild card spot though. 9-8 this year. Yeah. That's big competition. Yep. Justin,
I do have them being the third place team. I don't necessarily know they'll go 9-8, although I can't say I'd be surprised. I have them in that range, but I don't think they're going to hit that winning season as of yet. I think it's more of an 8-9, 7-10 kind of year, and not because of the moves that they made this year. I do like the moves they made. Looking through it, there's a lot of games where I don't necessarily know I'd give them the benefit of the doubt. And maybe that's a personal thing, but I don't have them as a winning season. And I think that the questions are a little heavier this offseason.
I was going to say you're going to go 8-8-1 instead because, ties.
That would be funny.
Yeah.
Although, technically, win percentage-wise, that would make them above 500. So that gives them technically a winning percentage.
That's true. You're right.
Justin did say not a winning
one wouldn't be above 500. That'd be exactly 500.
No, a tie counts as a little more than a win in like percentage.
It'd be like 5.
It doesn't count as more than a win, but it's not a loss. So you don't get that loss percentage. You just get that 500. It's exactly 500 to be 8-8-1
Okay, agreed.
Anyways, it's not like a opinion thing. It's like a math. It's math thing. It's 8-8-1.
No, it would show 8-8-1, but the win percentage it wouldn't say 500. The tie
it would absolutely say 500. We could bet on it. How much you want to bet?
The
Steelers went 8-8-1. They were exactly 500.
What? You would pick the Steelers to be that?
It is. No, they did. It happened a couple years ago. Remember when we thought they were going to have a losing record and they ended up getting a tie in the last week of the season? They were 500. They made the playoffs.
Was that 2022?
500.
Was that 2022?
I don't know, but Jerk, he's right. 8-8-1 does get the 50% exactly.
I don't believe it. But anyways, Justin, you will give us your first seed.
He hates math.
Justin,
don't we all?
Justin, give us your, we skip from 2 to 1 for this, so we give the first seed first. So give us your first and second seed to finish off the division.
Guys, the Green Bay Packers are going to be second in this division because the Detroit Lions are just flat out the better team as of right now. I like the Packers defense a whole lot more, but there's just more question marks on the Packers than there are on the Lions. And even with the tougher schedule, this Lions team is one of the teams to beat in the NFC right now. Not a whole lot has changed in my mind between last season and this season. I think the only difference may be now that they have a small target on their back because of the success that they've had. They're not surprising anyone this year. Not that they surprised people last year. Everyone expected them to be good. But I think that the Packers will be a very close second. I expect both teams to have a winning record. If you told me both teams had double-digit wins, I'd be a little surprised, but it's not unheard of in my mind. It's just difficult to do that in the same division. But I think that the Detroit Lions are the team to beat, or maybe even in the NFC.
That's fair.
Yeah. Well, I got them both starting 6-0. I think both teams will start 6-0 this year, but
You and your streaks, man.
I know, man. I'm loving it. But and for funny kicker, I have the Packers beating the Lions in week 9 in Lambeau. But that's about it for Green Bay. I have Detroit not only winning this division, but I have them winning this conference in the regular season. I have them going 14-3, the Lions. I think that they're that good of a team to supplant San Francisco as the team to beat in this conference. And I think, Jurg, your prediction of the conference running through the Motor City will come to fruition. For Green Bay, I have them at 11-6, which I think is the best of the wild card teams that I think you can ask for, because they're a very good team. I think they made a lot of good strides last year. But as I said, there's just that significant step from Green Bay to Detroit. Like if you were comparing, Jared Goff to Jordan Love, even-ish, maybe. Running backs, even-ish, maybe. Wide receivers, Detroit leaps and bounds because of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Tight ends, leaps and bounds because of Laporta. And so I think that that's part of where you're going to see the issues here. But I think that these two teams are going to be slugging it out. So I see Detroit 14-3 winning this division, number 1 seed in the conference, and Green Bay 11-6. Great year for them, and they'll live to see some postseason football.
Yeah, most likely. Similar. Lions are the number 1 seed for me in the NFC North. I think that's not even a conversation. So it's going to be the Lions first, the Packers second. I think that's, aside from us predicting that being the case, I think that is going to be the case, right? Like it would take something monumentally wrong for Detroit to prevent them from winning the division. I think we expect all things to be equal. The Lions are just that little bit better this season than Green Bay, to say the very least. So it's going to be something to say the very least. But I think we're expecting this division to at least be a bit interesting. Well, unless you're Rick and the Vikings are just going to be, top 3 pick more than anything else, top 3 pick contender. But the Detroit Lions, for all of us, so I can just recap this because we all have the exact same once again. But the Detroit Lions are our 1st seed. The Green Bay Packers are our 2nd seed, 3rd seed, Chicago Bears, 4th seed, Minnesota Vikings. My, oh my, how the NFC North has changed over the last couple of years, boys. To say the very least. 2 years ago, the Minnesota Vikings won this division. Isn't that crazy?
They were frauds back then, and they're frauds now.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. So, that being said, that completes this week's edition of the 2024 of the Sports Ages of Chaos 2024 NFL Divisional Breakdown. But that is not the full end of the show, because you guys know what we end the show with every single week. Unless you're new here, if you are, welcome. But the way we end the show every single week is the Podfather himself gets the last word on things in life, because it is Ranton Rick's Rostrum Podium. Podfather, do you think?
Honorable mention, just as you brought it up, if you're new here, where the hell have you been for the last 112 episodes? Come on. 3 and 2 on my podium this week are going to be short and sweet, because I think these things are both stupid, but they're not really worthy of more conversation than just me mentioning them, because I think they're moronic. But number 1, I'm going to go a long form on a little bit here. Number 3, the NBA Cup is stupid. I think it's absolutely the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I get it for a fledgling league, or for other leagues, but this is dumb. It's a dumb format. It's a dumb setup. It's a dumb name. It's just dumb. Dumb, dummy, dumb. Number 2, exit velocity in baseball is the dumbest stat I've ever heard of in my entire life. It doesn't matter if you can hit the ball 115 miles an hour if it's a ground out to the shortstop. Nobody cares. It's I can throw the ball 99 miles an hour. That's great. Where does it end up? In the second deck of the outfield, because it was a home run 95% of the time. Nobody cares. What matters is, can you strike guys out? Can you hit home runs? Can you get batting average? That's what's most important. I don't care about your exit velo, and leave your Carl Ravitch at home, because ESPN baseball Sunday night is awful. Now, number 1, this is something that I think we need to address as a society. Scratch-offs. Lottery scratch-offs. I don't hate them. I like them. They're ubiquitous. They're as easy as time itself. Here's what I hate about scratch-offs. if you're standing in line at a counter at a convenience store and you have somebody in front of you who buys a bunch of them and then proceeds to scratch them off at the register after they paid for them already. Hey, bozo, you're probably going to lose anyway, so move to the side or take them outside and scratch them off there. Stop getting in my way. My slushie's getting cold and melting. It's hot and melting. I don't even know. I'm so frazzled by this. Like, I'm here in this convenience store line getting these food, and I just want to get to my car and drive home. And you're sitting there because you have to scratch off your damn loose change $1 scratch off, and you didn't win. So guess what? Go home. Stop gambling your money away, or get out of my line. Like, it's stupid. Like, all I'm saying, if you have the scratch offs, take them somewhere else. Go walk the store and scratch them off somewhere else and then throw them out. But stop standing right in the middle and stop trying to make conversation with anybody else about, these scratch offs are not my day today. I buy $50 worth of them. I was in Vietnam. Whatever. Like, nobody cares about any of that minus the Vietnam thing. Thank you to our veterans. But, stop holding up the line when you've got 5 people behind you, including that mother behind me with the crying baby. They need to go, but they can't because you're too busy with your coin scratching off the cherry in the casino game. We have to do better as a society than that. And if you have a scratch off that's a winning ticket, give it to me because I need the money. Thank you.
He does have a child's college fund to pay one of these days, ladies and gentlemen.
I do.
So with a really ran through that red podium right there, Rick, with the first two topics. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, that was the red podium. This was this week's division preview, and that completes this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. One and all, thank you for joining us on the 113th episode, as Rick alluded to. Where have you been? Continue to join us for much more as this NFL offseason continues. And as we are going to go into the 2024 campaign, it's going to be a fun year, to say the very least, for football. And we're just going to have a good time doing it. We're going to continue the previews on the next episode. We're going to wrap up the NFC. Like I said, we're going to go through the NFC West. It has been the division that we finished on the NFC the last couple of years, and for good reason, because the NFC West has kind of been the division to run things to an extent over the last 3-4 years in the NFC. So, and then after that, we'll go to the AFC and then the season itself. And as the pod daughter comes into frame, that is a beautiful way to end off this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Thanks so much for joining us on this week's edition of Fun Football and Chaos. And we'll see you guys next week as the division breakdowns head west. Take care, everyone.